Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our thought leadership event today. My name is Ben Stapleton, and I'm the Executive Director for the U.S. Green Building Council, Los Angeles. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but we're really excited to address this important issue around, frankly, reducing fire risk here in California. This is an issue that's very close to home for many of us. In fact, even for me today, here in Pasadena. I'm going to get to the screen here so I can go ahead. It's like Inception right now. I'm sharing a presentation inside a presentation. All right, there we go. Before we kick things off today, I'd like to proceed with a land acknowledgement here. It's an important component for us whenever we do an event. And to that end, I'd like to introduce Tina Orduno. Calderon, sorry, Tina Orduno Calderon. Tina?
Thank you, Ben. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, mi'iha nehinkam, hello relatives. Netwanya netina, ko mikrabet na ha tongbe, koi mixkanagan, koi yoeme, awish koneha, ekwa avo manet, tehobet aumet. And I am saying to you, my name is Tina Orduno Calderon. I'm Gabrielino Tongba, Ventureño Chumash, and Yoeme. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. I was asked to start with a land acknowledgement. So I begin today by acknowledging my tribal relatives, past, present, and emerging, the original Tarahatam of Tawangad, which is the peoples of the area today known as Los Angeles County, parts of Orange County, parts of San Bernardino County, as well as the 4 Southern Channel Islands. I honor my ancestors for their contributions in living in harmony with the lands, the waters, the minerals, the plants, and the animal relatives here and across our large unceded territory. Yarar pomokre henuk vatam, we remember the ancestors. Awesh kondreha ahihirom kohyanayanad, we thank our elders and our teachers. Karukenakre eotarhem, we stand with our children and the 7 generations to come. Thank you for this time, for allowing a land acknowledgement. And also I would like to remind you all to please walk gently upon our Earth Mother and give her the love and respect that she deserves. Thank you, Awesh Koneha.
And such an important moment for us, especially with the issue that we're going to talk about today, which is around reducing fire risk here in California. And to center us today, I've written a little something. Usually you just hear awkward remarks from me to kick off these events. This will probably be just as equally awkward, but I prepared a little something to really center us a little bit before we dive into our content and our keynotes today. So I hope you'll humor me. Dark skies, red eyes, dry cries, seeking fresh air, we struggle to repair the balance before us, told in the rings of the forest. Will it burn before we know, before we grow to understand the truth, that there is no future proof, only the now to react, adapt, and illuminate our impact? For it won't happen to me, to us, or them, yet we all share this home bright with fractured rays of grays unless we struggle to see through the haze of our own hot air, for the symptom but not the cause. Breathing we pause, thick as an August afternoon, not doom nor gloom, brittle but not broken, we seek resilience as we bask in the brilliance of our own fire light. Let us write our curious chapter in this endless human firefight. Break or bend, embers like dust in the wind, giant sequoia, black and brown, California. Thank you for hearing me for that moment. I'm going to go ahead and share another screen here for our slides today, and we'll get into the rest of the program. You'll have to bear with me. The app doesn't seem to like me also sharing the same application that I'm using to access this event. There we go. So why are we talking about this issue today around reducing fire risk here in California? We had our 20th annual Municipal Green Building Conference and Expo just last month. And, the time is really now. And that was our theme for the event. I think that's really our theme for this year. We're experiencing drought right now. We're experiencing a year-round fire risk. We need to focus on climate action and rapid decarbonization. We need to focus on adaptation and resilience, on equity and environmental justice. That the time is now for racial healing and building community power. And the time is now for a healthy post-COVID future, as we all sit here at the beginning of summer thinking about what is the future really going to look like over the coming months. And this is really our decade of climate impact, and I really want to impart that to you. This poppy you see here on the right-hand screen only blooms after a fire has burned through its landscape. And this is really a moment for us to take a pause to create positive change in our communities and in our state. So who are we here at the U.S. Green Building Council Los Angeles? Ultimately, our organization is focused on transforming Southern California into a more sustainable region for all. We're an independent nonprofit who may be affiliated with the National Green Building Council that runs the LEED credential and certification. But ultimately, we're focused on people here locally in our communities and the issues here in Southern California. And the built environment is really our entry point to create change. And the part of the reason we've had this event today is that we really want the green building community to adopt fire prevention as a core issue. And we want the fire prevention community to see that we can be a valuable partner in this discussion. There's already a structure for our community to get certifications. There's already a sales process where we sell developers, building owners, and managers on how to make their properties more sustainable and why that's beneficial for them. We want to bring that same approach to how we approach and making smart decisions around fire reduction and prevention in our buildings and our communities. And we really want to encourage the fire prevention community to leverage our green building community. And I'd go even a little bit further to say that our green building community has a responsibility to really talk about fire risk reduction as part of sustainability and how we advance green buildings on a local level. So what have we been doing so far? From 2017 to 2019, we had workshops post the Woolsey and Thomas fires, helping folks rebuild in a more sustainable manner. We did one-to-one expert consultations and support for those folks. We did resilience training and have built resilience training over those years that we're still offering now, as well as a study for here in LA on how to integrate resilience into our buildings that included fire risk reduction in a more in a long-term way that could really last. Last year in 2020, despite all the challenges, we hosted a webinar on best practices to reduce fire risk. We did a virtual FireWise tour. And at our Municipal Green Building Conference and Expo, we had several sessions that addressed fire risk reduction. And then we've also been developing some great partnerships over the last year that we really want to leverage going forward. To that end, we've had this event today that you're here at. I'm really excited to hear from California Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara. We've got a great panel with several elected officials here talking about what's happening on the state level. So we're looking forward to diving into that. But this event was really meant to bring these communities together. And as part of that, we're focused on how can we build some certifications here to really provide expertise in contractors and landscapers and the folks who are doing building design, construction, and maintenance to reduce fire risk. And so we're seeking funding right now to build out these certifications and this training so we can deliver this to our community and really enable these folks to sell themselves as a better alternative to what's there so people can better protect themselves in the face of fire. And here in the fall, we're going to be having a tour focused on the Inland Empire. This virtual tour will be hosted on September 23rd. We're going to cover a variety of topics on reducing fire risk, but really we're trying to bring these messages to our underserved communities that still don't have the awareness and education they need to be empowered to reduce fire risk on their own homes and properties. And we'll also be building a wildfire defense toolkit that we'll be distributing to folks who attend that tour and will be available on our website. And all this should be available here as we continue to build out our program in our talent portal. That's on our website. We really have created a centralized hub for education in the green building space. That includes recorded content, that includes upcoming training. We have a mentor network. I really encourage you to come check out our talent portal. And I do want to highlight before we get to our keynote that there's some great trends right now in the green building industry that really feed into reducing fire risk that we need to take advantage of. And I really encourage the fire prevention community to work with us to make sure they're leveraging this moment for them as well. And some of that is around materials. We're having transparency in materials in a way we've never had it before. And that should include looking at what's really the fire risk from these materials, not just how they're made and the chemicals that go into them, but well, how's this going to affect my property and my potential for fire? And smart homes, we're seeing increases in the number and availability of indoor and outdoor air quality sensors. smart irrigation systems, fire suppression systems. These things are getting cheaper. How can we integrate smart homes into this process to reduce our fire risk? And then energy, we've all seen the impacts of scheduled blackouts over the recent months. People are more looking at decentralized energy and microgrids. How can we leverage this moment also to reduce fire risk and really lean into that? And then occupant health is an incredibly important issue for us. We're continuing to look more and more at the impacts of our materials, the spaces we occupy on us. And this should all be part of the conversation when we look at how to reduce fire risk in our communities and in our buildings. And this moment should be leveraged by both communities. And so if you appreciate our content today, I would ask you to if you're inspired and you can spare a little bit, to donate now by texting GREEN to 7077.
Is it frozen? I can't.
Commissioner Laurie, we can see and hear you. So you can go ahead.
Okay, I was like, it's all quiet.
You're ready to go. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you again for inviting me to speak today. I'm pleased to be here, and I know some of my former colleagues are going to be on a panel. So I just want to say hi to Senator Portantino, Senator Stern, Senator Wood, and of course Deputy Secretary Morse. It's such an important dialogue that we're having. Today's meeting is very timely and important for insurance in California. 85% of our state is currently in either extreme or exceptional drought, and fire season has already started. We really need to start thinking about how we are going to adapt and to live with fire, with flooding and extreme heat. If we can harden our homes and our communities, now we can help reduce losses for the future fires we know are going to happen. We also need to make planning and development decisions that are smart, are safe, and are sustainable. The questions being addressed today: how do we reduce fire risk through smart home hardening and landscaping, and how to reduce fire risk through effective urban planning, get really at the heart of the matter. I have made climate resilience a top priority at the Department of Insurance in a way we've never had before. When I was sworn in as insurance commissioner, I created the Climate and Sustainability branch within the department, the first in the country. We need to be forward-thinking, proactive in approaching climate impacts, and that really includes our insurance industry, which can do much more to incentivize resilient communities. 2 years ago, we hosted insurance commissioners and staff from 11 states to view the damage from the 2018 Camp Fire and to discuss how to reduce wildfire impacts in the future. It's clear that our way forward really relies on our ability to take home to take home and community mitigation actions, not just in California, but across the country. Studies from the Pew Research determine that for every dollar we spend in pre-disaster mitigation, it saves $6 in disaster cost. And if we don't act now, it's gonna be our seniors, our immigrant communities, our working families who are the least prepared to be and will be hurt the most by climate change. And by the way, these are the exact same communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So, essentially we have a window right now when we can both plan for climate instability and also restore our natural systems, healthy forest, urban tree canopies, wetlands, coastal dunes, rivers, and other natural ecosystems. We know our buffer can buffer the effects of climate threats. I suggest, we think about ecosystems, ecosystem resilience as a form of insurance. If we invest now in resilience, we can reduce the future relief and rebuilding costs, as we're seeing those costs skyrocket throughout California. Investments in resilient infrastructure and eco restoration can protect climate vulnerable communities in a very cost-effective way. And unlike traditional gray infrastructure that depreciates in value over time, in wear and tear, well-tended, healthy forest and watersheds perform much better as they mature, and which is a much better investment. Unfortunately, right now, our planet is out of balance. And as you well know, California has endured devastating fires in the past few years. In 2020, we suffered one of the most destructive wildfire seasons in our state's history. 31 Californians lost their lives. More than 10,000 structures were damaged or destroyed in the largest fires in our history. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to evacuate, and they spent weeks out of their homes while their fires burned. Millions of people lived under smoky skies, dealing with the health consequences for those with asthma, with lung conditions. And, climate change is intensifying these destructive fires. And we know, for those of us that live in urban LA, that have invested millions of dollars cleaning the air and making sure that we have clean and healthy air to breathe. Just one fire in Northern California, in LA County, or in San Diego erases years of, all these efforts that we've worked to clean up our air. And, again, I've seen it firsthand. Homeowners are left wondering how they will find and keep insurance. I have met virtually or in person with communities from over 30 counties, thousands of California residents in the wake of the fires. And in several, we see several common concerns and themes. First, we have seen a surge in policy cancellations by insurance companies that is causing anxiety and frustration. From 2018 to 2019, homeowner policy cancellations increased 31% statewide and 61% in areas where that are moderate to very high fire risk. Second, there's a strong desire for insurance companies to recognize home hardening and community mitigation, and for consistent statewide mitigation standards. Rates should really reflect your risk, and that includes mitigation. And currently, that is not the case. And third, we need more transparency about how insurance companies evaluate fire risks so that homeowners know how to mitigate for these actions and bring their wildfire risk score down. So in response to these I'm taking several important administrative actions. In December, I convened a meeting with mitigation and science experts to explore the issues of including home hardening, community mitigation, prescribed burns, among other things. In February, I announced the first ever wildfire resilience partnership with Governor Newsom to work together with Cal OES, Cal Fire, the CPUC, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research to establish consistent home and community hardening mitigation for insurance. And I'm proposing new rules to require that wildfire risk scores be transparent for consumers. Insurance companies increasingly use these scores to determine which homes will be covered and how much they will charge. But few homeowners know their score and what they can do to change it. So I've been pressing the insurance companies to offer incentives to policyholders for home hardening. I think of this really as a kind of good driver discount that so many of us get. And it's something that 8 companies currently do already. So I think this is a very popular and important thing that we should do, and it would do a lot of good. Home hardening, community-based hardening techniques are effective and essential methods to reduce wildfire risk, to save lives and property. In Boulder, Colorado, the county has a program called Wildfire Partners, where homeowners can get their home hardened, get it inspected and certified, and then several insurance companies have committed to write policies for these certified homes. This is a way forward, I believe, here in California as well. We need insurance companies to recognize mitigation actions and for homeowners to have the ability to harden their home and get those retrofits certified. One piece of the puzzle is really partnering among states. As chair, I currently serve as chair of the Climate and Sustainability, Climate and Resilience, I should say, Executive Task Force at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and I'm working with jurisdictions from all over the United States on climate risk and resilience to explore new insurance products. Just last year, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners tested a suite of best practices for wildfire mitigation in several locations in California and Oregon, and published its research report with the modeling from RMS and the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. The results really help demonstrate that wildfire risk reduction is effective and economically meaningful for so many. As we consider appropriate hardening techniques, we need to acknowledge that nature is our ally. We need to think of approach in, I think I would say, kind of 3 ways. We improve resilience to low-income and vulnerable communities facing the brunt of climate change impacts. We promote community-wide mitigation and recovery, and we invest in climate impacts. So, we need to listen and learn from our indigenous people who have lived on this land for millennia and understand how to tend our habitat. For instance, we know that their experience, the activities like prescribed fire can significantly decrease the risk of catastrophic wildfire, but it's become nearly impossible to obtain insurance that covers prescribed on a private land. I've also recognized that while insurance plays a vital role in recovery, many households, small businesses don't have sufficient coverage to even fund or repair a full rebuilding. So to narrow this protection gap, we need to explore innovative models of insurance that take a more holistic, community-wide approach. Community-based insurance is quite flexible and can be tailored to specific needs and perils of the community. So ultimately, as we look ahead to increasingly intense fire season, we need to understand the risk we face and really optimize where and how we can motivate risk reduction efforts and employ insurance as a strategy for and to shape recovery and resilience. Insurance can, in my opinion, can and should play a critical role in stabilizing and of course, not only stabilizing, but decreasing the risk and supporting recovery. It's a tool that can influence how we and where land is developed and how well infrastructure is fortified. That is critical for our low-income communities who are in the path of climate change, and we will face many future fires, unfortunately, and look forward to finding opportunities to collaborate with you all as we tackle these challenges. Again, thank you, and appreciate you all creating the space for having this important conversation and really understanding that insurance has and must have a role to play as we continue to address these critical issues. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lara, and thank you for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate your career of service to us and our communities here in California, and we look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see and hear me now. Apologies for earlier. Next up, we have an incredible panel from a number of elected officials. So with that, I'd like to invite up Senator Portantino to the stage with me here. Senator, are you there? Bear with us, folks. We're just getting everyone here on stage.
I'm here.
Hello, Senator. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
No worries. And as you may or may not be aware, it looks like Senator Stern had a flight that was delayed and will be dialing in from the airport here in just a moment. And then Assemblymember Wood sends his deep and sincere apologies. I guess he's leading some priority health legislation, and the governor's office called him in today to lead some key negotiations with stakeholders. So I think we'll probably have Senator Stern join us in a few moments. But it's going to be you and I to kick things off, which is quite all right with me, if it's okay with you.
I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Well, look, to me, this feels like this has been really a really important, critical year when it comes to policy around fire reduction here in California. One thing I wanted to note, and maybe it's a good way to kind of kick off our conversation, is that Senate Bill 45 did not move off the Senate floor and was really looking at putting bond funding in place potentially to secure funding for fire resilience. What are your thoughts there, and what do you think the next steps are around funding on the state level for reducing risk?
The good news is, I believe, as we move forward with some of the budget trailer bills and some of the implementation of the budget we adopted on Monday, that a big chunk of SB 45 is going to be included in the budget. So that's what I think we're all working towards. The good news and the bad news is, with the COVID sort of truncated session, we're not going to get to everything legislatively, but the good news is we have a very healthy budget this year. Last year we thought we were really underfunded. You remember, we were very cautious. But it looks like there's significant resources available. And so I expect a big chunk of SB 45 to move forward. And I don't care, whether my name's on the bill. It's more important that we put in place the resources and the policies to address the issues. And so keep watching for the next 2 weeks as that unfolds.
Thank you, Senator. And that's actually great news, because I was really excited to see about that moving forward. So really happy that we'll still see some funding there.
Right. And we're trying to reconcile it with the Assembly effort too. I think it was AB 1500. So we're doing side by sides to make sure that we do right by both the Assembly and the Senate.
Fantastic. And now that you mentioned that, Assembly Bill 981 did not move out of the Assembly either, and that was really focused on establishing a fire safe council in the Natural Resources Agency. Is that something that you think is necessary or important? What are your thoughts on that?
I sort of have mixed feelings. I mean, we're getting our arms around what we can do, from the current infrastructure, because as you all know, fire season is 12 months out of the year now, and it's immediate. We need immediate action and immediate solutions. So with having more smart people involved in the conversation. But I also don't want to hold back efforts by creating a new council that needs to get up to speed. So, I'm not against it, but I also think we need to use the existing infrastructure capacity. I represent JPL. There's a lot of climate scientists in JPL that we can tap into to help us.
Well, I live right by JPL, Senator, so you represent me as well, and so I appreciate your leadership there. Last bill I'll mention directly before we get into some other policy questions is Assembly Bill 642. That was sort of an omnibus fire prevention bill that deals a good amount with prescribed burning. Are you aware of that measure, and do you have any thoughts to share on kind of that approach?
Yeah, I mean, when I was on the La Cañada City Council, we did a lot of as you know, the station fire at that time was one of the largest fires, if not the largest fire in history. And so, we really spent a lot of time strategically doing prescribed burns. We also employed goats around, sensitive areas around Descanso, doing everything we could to prepare ourselves on fuel modification. And so, we need to look at our native plants, our sage, our scrub. There's a lot we can do. And so that bill hasn't come to me yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's in it. drill down in it and see where what we can use out of it and what it's trying to do. All those mitigation strategies, I think Ricardo said, everything we spend up front helps us in the long run. So the more time we spend on mitigation up front, the better we are. And planning is part of that as well. Develop, how we build, what we use to build, where we build, all of that comes into play, obviously.
Yeah, could you talk about that a little more, just in terms of sort of the approach to not only how we build, but where we build? How do you think we should address community development, which obviously is a challenge on some level?
Well, one of the things that sort of frustrates me as we look into some of our more rural and hillside communities, a lot of those are equestrian areas. And the more dense we make it, the more difficult we make it for people to get their livestock out during fires. So, I think that's something we have to look at is the density factor. The push and the pull of our people want to use it, go to it, live in it, enjoy it, swim in its lakes and rivers, and it's why we're all here. And so, I'm hesitant to restrict access, but I think we have to be smart in how we approach it. And from a land use perspective, and from a materials perspective, and just from a hardening perspective, if we're running power, we should underground it, and other things. We should have backup generators. We should put in all of that infrastructure, and again, use all the tools at our display. But I certainly, representing, from big to high, all the way through Altadena, and in particular, I'm concerned about density in those sensitive areas, and the impact on, historic equestrian properties, and that concerns me as well.
Having hiked in a lot of those areas myself, that concern makes a lot of sense. How do you think we should balance sort of the issues with having, a housing crisis and housing affordability with that kind of development and with addressing density? Do you have any ideas there? I know it's a complex issue.
It's very complex, but one of the things, back in 2011 when we had a dedicated revenue stream for affordable housing through redevelopment, I was one of a handful of folks who opposed the dissolution of redevelopment. And I've got the battle scars to prove it, because it was a very unpopular position. And my argument at the time was, you can't do away with the state's only dedicated revenue stream without having a replacement. And here we are a decade later, and Jim Bell and Mike McGuire tried year after year to create a dedicated housing fund. I prefer that model of, incentivizing and regulating what we want. The other frustration has been about creating density around transit corridors and expanding light rail and getting people out of their cars and doing, smart developments around transit. And I think that's appropriate. And again, in particular in Southern California, when we're looking to expand the GO line in particular, all the way out to the Ontario airport, all those cities want to cluster their density environmentally around those transit hubs. And, millennials own cars. And if you, build housing around those transit stops, you're going to accommodate a lot of folks who want to, who are aligned sort of mentally or geopolitically with the new economy, and want to be green and don't want to be driving. So I think that's part of the challenge the state has. We've changed the parameters so often. And it seems like right now on housing, which again is tied into all of this environmental protection that we want to do, and where it makes sense. But it seems like the conversation has been changed from housing to a battle between Ronald Reagan and FDR. And it's very ironic in that, FDR believed that there was public for the government to play in helping do what we want the public to do and what cities to do, and we'd fund it and we'd define it and we'd encourage it and we'd make it happen from a public perspective. And then of course Reagan's relation and empower the private sector and trickle down economics. And we know for 40 years, even Biden during his recent speech to Congress said trickle down doesn't work, but here we are in California doing trickle down housing and cutting regulation and empowering developers to solve this problem. The irony is that the Reagan-esque approach is coming out of San Francisco, which is typically much more liberal, and the FDR model is coming more out of Southern California, which is typically, so it seems completely and totally backwards and counterintuitive. But that's the battle we have right now. I prefer the FDR model much more so. We should fund it, we should define it, and we should encourage it, and we should help it. And if we're going to expand mass transit, we should also then give cities the funding necessary to build it around that. One of the bills I have this year, SB 15, is looking at all the vacant and dormant retail, the malls around. COVID exacerbated the change in our buying powers. And there's a lot more malls out there that are vacant. And so one of the things we've done with cities is the way we monetize land use is we created a disincentive to build housing by incentivizing sales tax. Cities get a greater percentage of sales tax than they do from property tax. And so a city would typically leave a vacant mall vacant for a decade, hoping to get the new to come in, and they'd rather leave it vacant than build housing. What it seeks to do is it estimates the sales tax revenue for 7 years of that property and gives that to the cities if they build affordable and workforce housing. Again, the problem with some of the other housing bills is they really don't require it to be affordable. The market to set that, where SB 15 says if you build affordable housing, we'll give you the sales tax that property would have generated. And so the affordable housing folks like it, the cities like it, the developers like it, the building trades like it, because it's empowering locals and helping them by providing 7 years of resources to do it.
No, thank you, Senator. And I think when you were speaking about redevelopment earlier, you were talking about the Community Redevelopment Agency, the CRA. Mm-hmm. And, I will say I worked quite a bit with the CRA here. I guess it's been a long time ago now, about 10 years ago. And I felt like it was one of the few tools we had actually on a local level, especially here in LA, to do not only economic development work, but housing development work. So I think you make a great point there. And actually, I hadn't connected those dots before.
Yeah, we probably would have had $12 to $15 billion spent on affordable housing had redevelopment not gone away, which would have made a difference. I sort of smile when because I didn't support SB 50 for frankly for obvious reasons, because it was Reaganomics on steroids. And people started going after me for being anti-housing, and I go, wait a minute, where were you when I stood up for redevelopment for local government, local government to build affordable housing? We need to fund it and build it.
No, very, very, very true. Getting back to fire for a moment, is there any other legislation or action by the state administration that you think we need in California to reduce our fire risk that isn't being addressed right now?
Is important. That's another tool wherever you build, whatever you do, you've got to make sure the infrastructure can support what you want to do. And so, we need the infrastructure, whether it's undergrounding utilities, whether it's having resources available on the ground, whether it's having the equipment to put brush fires out before they rage. That's important. I mean, what is it, Victory? $10 million to buy that plane that would be at $10 million. For $10 million, we can buy a plane and outfit it with the best technology that JP offer. So there's lots of GPS and sensitive and equipment we can do to make if we use new technology. So I think that's important legislatively to look at that. And so the other piece is, having the infrastructure on ground, having the infrastructure to fight, and having the right planning tools in place. Obviously, Mr. Wood, if he was joining us, his district is as vast or vaster than mine, has been affected. Working with the utilities, be in this together and not be in one silo over another. And so the Senate has a working group that Mr. McGuire chairs, and Mr. Dodd, those folks who were affected by those Northern California fires, Susan Rubio from Southern California. And they're refining our legislative package almost every day, trying to get ready for this. But I remember when we used to talk about when are the super scoopers going to get here during fire season, and of course, now fire season's 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like we're going to have any break either. One of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit was just, the fact that we're in, another drought year, and really we've been in, a long-term drought. This isn't something that's new. How do you think we should address those connections maybe between drought, water use, fire, and public health? What are your thoughts there around those connections?
Well, obviously conservation is big. Typically you get a bigger return on your investment when you invest it in conservation efforts. So I think as far as our water supply goes, that's important that we spend our resources on conserving our precious. That's one relation. So I think, again, Ricardo talked about the impact that COVID has highlighted on, communities of color, underrepresented communities, the disparate impacts. So we have to recognize that piece of the puzzle as well. And again, not just cosmetically, but, income disparity is part of it. That's a big piece. Education level is part of it. We have to invest in, and that's why this year's budget is so critical, is because we have to, in upward mobility, we have to invest in healthcare, everything is interrelated. And so we need policies that connect those dots from the water fountain to the classroom, from the job to the person to the family. I've been, in the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of hiking throughout. I was in I was in Pasadena on Sunday, and the number of people out using our trails and being out there, families, they really do reflect California. And so we have to be cognizant of what it is to be a Californian, and we have to embrace that diversity and put all of these pieces of the puzzle together as we move forward collectively.
Amazingly well said, Senator. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things that really blew me away too was just, the air quality issues we experienced from fire last year, and how that already exasperated, the air quality issues we were having in a lot of our underserved communities. It's really just a exponential public health issue on some level that we need to try to get our hands around.
It's a shame. I'm going to say it's a shame probably watching today, climate change is real. We got to get all aren't watching today to understand that it is, and it is going to affect our grandchildren and continue to make our job harder as we deal with these.
Glad to hear you're a believer, Senator. Now, last question for you, and I appreciate you taking the time with us today. It sounds like Senator Stern.
You just and just uh-oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Buffering. Hello, everyone.
Can you hear me now, Senator? Hello, Senator. Can you hear me now?
Ben, you are back and we hear you.
Oh,
I no longer hear the senator.
One good turn deserves another. Well, the good news is we only had one question left, and it seems like we got through most of them. All right. Well, thank you, Senator Portantino. It seems like we may have lost you now, so that's okay. I was just there myself. I think I can hear you now. Oh, now he's gone. All right. With that, and apologies for the technical difficulties today, folks. The internet, I guess, is not as dependable as we once thought it was. I'd like to introduce our closing keynote for this first hour. As a reminder, we're going to have two panels following this keynote, one on community level design and planning, and a second on building level design and maintenance and construction. So our next keynote is from Jessica Morse. She's the Deputy Secretary for Forest and Wildfire Resilience at the California Natural Resources Agency. She's a fifth-generation Northern Californian. Jessica has grown up hiking, backpacking, hunting, fishing, and skiing throughout the Sierra in California. That sounds like a great way to grow up. I wish I'd had that growing up. Her family still maintains their original homestead forest land in Gold Run, California. She's dedicated her career to public service, serving her country all over the world, including in Iraq. She developed innovative strategies and coordinated multi-agency coalitions to execute those strategies around issues of poverty, counterterrorism, and nuclear nonproliferation. Welcome, Jessica, today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben, and it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you as we're really thinking about how do we live in an age of climate change around wildfire resilience, and how do we build in an age of climate change around wildfire resilience. So I want to talk a little bit about how we got here, the state of the fires, and then some tools that we have available at the state that we are excited to start really scaling up. So as all of you know, California has been a fire adapted ecology. For millennia, tribes managed with ecological and cultural fire across the landscape and kept healthy. And around colonization ended cultural burning. The gold rush came through and ended up clear cutting 97% of California's trees and forests, which left us with a fairly devastated landscape. And then there was a political decision that was made that is actually impacting us today. So in the wake of the devastation of the denuding of our forests started to grow back overly dense. Out of that was born the conservation movement, this radical concept at the time, at the turn of the century, of public land. Gifford Pinchot and Teddy Roosevelt, when they were trying to get the enforcement arm of the conservation movement, the Forest Service, funded through Congress, they presented it as a fire suppression entity because Congress did not want to fund the Forest Service. They did not want to support conservation. And so as a result, they made a trade-off between the politics of the day and the realities of the ecology. And so even though they understood that fire played an ecological role on these landscapes, they presented the Forest Service and gave it a mandate of fire suppression, and it left us with fire being removed and eliminated from these landscapes as these forests grew back overly dense. And so now in areas where we should be seeing burns every 15 to 20 years, thinning out the understories and revitalizing our forests, we've ended up with overly stocked, overly dense areas and forest landscape ecosystems. And what it has done is it's left us with really intense fuel loads on the landscape, whether you're talking about rolling oak woodlands, our fire ecologies are off balance. Then you enter climate change. So second multi-generational crisis in the making, colliding with this legacy and this political decision of fire suppression. Climate change is coming in and causing now exponential growth in the fires we're seeing. So we had a once in a millennia drought from 2012 to 2015 that destroyed, that killed off 169 million trees throughout the Sierra and devastated our ecologies. We bring in record heat waves that dry out those dead trees and the dry grasses and the fuel loads around the state. And it resulted in dry lightning and those lightning complex fires that we had last year. The fourth climate assessment in 2018 predicted that we would see a 77% increase in annual acres burned in California by the year 2100. Between 2019 and 2020, we had a 1,500% increase in acres burned just between 1 year. We went from 277,000 acres burned in 2019 to 4.2 million acres burned in 2020 in those lightning complex fires. So the scale of this crisis is unprecedented, and the climate predictions came true 80 years early. So we are facing these colliding crises where we need to develop a way of having climate of fire resilience on our ecology and for our communities to be able to withstand wildfires and return them back to their normal ecological role in California's landscapes. What's really important is that there is a way to do this. We have, when we are investing on three fronts of fire resilience, I like to think of them as concentric circles. So we invest across, the outermost circle is across those landscapes, getting our landscapes to be thinned out, restored, returning native species that are fire resilient, removing invasive grasses, restoring chaparral, removing invasive plants, restoring rolling oak woodlands, that we are restoring these nat landscapes so that they are more fire resilient and able to withstand a naturally adapted fire ecology. Because what we've seen is that in areas, particularly up in our watersheds, where we've done pretty intensive fuel reduction, that means you kind of thin out the understories. What you end up with is a fire burning at an ecological level. The North Complex fire up in the Sierra was burning high intensity, devastated everything in its path as soon as it hit an area that had been an ecological restoration. So the understory had been thinned and the tree canopy remained. It burned ecologically, and that forest is healthy and thriving. And so we want to get back to a point where when fire hits the landscape, it burns in a way that's natural. So that's that outermost ring. So interventions across the landscape to develop that fire resilience. The next ring is interventions around communities for that wildland urban interface. This is where we're putting in strategic fuel breaks, evacuation routes along roadways so that you don't have flames up against cars in the middle of a fire. And these fuel breaks are really crucial because they are a place for firefighters to take a stand and arrest a fire before it comes into a community or slow it down so that community can escape. And we have been investing in those, and we saw them save dramatic lives and homes and property during the 2020 fires. It really allowed us to expand our capacity of fire suppression to be able to keep some of those fires under control and escape communities during those fires. There's a great example of one up outside of Paradise that was during the Camp Fire, so a high wind driven fire. That fire hit, the flank of that fire hit a strategic fuel break, 8-mile long fuel break, and it actually self-arrested. And just so you have a vision of what a fuel break is, it's fuel reduction. You're taking about 20 to 60% of the vegetation off of that area, so it'll look more like a park, trees kind of 30 feet apart, and so it reduces that fuel intensity. The last area, so we've got that, to be able to achieve this fire resilience, you've got a reduced fuel load and return intervals on those landscapes. You've created fuel breaks around communities to be able to slow or arrest fire. And then that last intervention are interventions inside of a community. So this is ensuring that we're investing in home hardening, defensible space, and tools that will allow homes to withstand a fire and for communities to survive in the worst case that a fire comes through, or when you have those big ember casts like you get a lot in Southern California. And so it's important to recognize that all three of these are important. No one of those is a standalone solution, because we need to be investing just as much in protecting our ecologies from wildfire as we are in protecting our communities. And when we reduce the fuel load on the landscape and protect those ecologies, it reduces the ember cast for those big wind-driven fires on the communities as well. So what's exciting is that we are now, for the first time, scaling up our investment on all three of those fronts. So the governor released his budget. It's a $1.2 billion investment in wildfire resilience. This is in addition to fire suppression tools. So it just as a comparison point, last year we had $75 million for wildfire resilience. And now we are looking at $1.2 billion. Of which we already received $536 million in an early action and emergency appropriation from the state legislature in April. And so crews are already out working on the ground and delivering many of the results we're wanting across all three of those landscapes. And so the rest is before the state legislature as we speak. So we are investing across all three of those fronts. We are investing in new programs for fire resilience on state-owned lands, so state parks, Department of Fish and Wildlife holdings. We're investing in holdings for small forested landowners. We have grants for wildland restoration. So down in Southern California, for example, they are removing invasive species along waterways, reducing fuel loads along roadsides. So those forest health grant dollars are outside of just forest ecosystems, and those are really delivering results on the landscape. In those strategic fuel break areas, your CAL FIRE units can be working with you on ensuring that we are investing in fire prevention grants. So those are building fuel breaks, getting crews to work to make sure that we have those protections around communities. And now for the first time, we are investing and scaling up in a program that will do direct investment in home hardening and defensible space. So the state's putting in $25 million. Our federal partners are matching us 3-to-1, $75 million. So we're going to be launching a pilot, $100 million pilot to demonstrate home hardening and defensible space. So we are investing across all three of these fronts: resilient landscapes, areas to arrest a fire before it comes into a community, and fire hardened communities. So in the worst case a fire comes through, they can withstand or have a higher survival rate for homes, and we can protect lives and property as we adapt to a more fire resilient ecosystem. What's also important to recognize is that we are investing in innovation, and particularly as you're thinking about green buildings and how we live on these landscapes, there's a lot of woody material coming out of these fuel reduction projects, whether it's manzanita or woody biomass. There's a lot of material coming out. And so encouraging and thinking about how you can build with it. So things like mass timber, California can now build up to 18 stories out of cross-laminated timber, which replaces steel and concrete in building construction. And what that does is it creates a way for us to use smaller diameter wood that would have been open pile burned or burned in a forest fire, and put that into a carbon sequestering tool that then offsets other carbon intensive materials. So there's a lot of innovation here of how we can use these materials to offset other carbon intensive areas or even fossil fuels. There's ways to turn this into liquid hydrogen, gasification, biodiesel. So there's a lot of things we can do with the woody material coming out of these fuel reduction projects, so that we are not only establishing more resilient landscapes, but we're finding better alternatives than just open pile burning it, and actually putting it to work in a way that creates either carbon neutral or carbon negative cycles. So I'm really excited for all of the innovation that you all are doing here. You are partners in this, and it is a crisis that has been multiple generations in the making, and this generation gets to solve it. So we are making a huge forward investment across all three fronts of fire resilience, and we are excited to partner with you and have you lead our efforts and empower you to join us in delivering results that 100 years from now, not only are we protecting life and safety today, but 100 years from now, generations look back at us and say, they did it right. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Morse. Thank you for your service. I'm not sure really what generation I'm part of anymore, but I think in general, this is all something that really we need to take up as an issue. This is our time to really make an impact. So thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you for suffering through some of our technical difficulties today. We have a great panel coming up here in just a moment. I'm going to share my screen so you can see this. So a quick break here for about, about 8 minutes until 5:10. And then we're going to have a panel on reducing fire risk through informed and effective community development with some great speakers, some of whom you heard from today who did some tours. But we have a really great lineup of speakers, and we'll see you here in a few minutes. Thank you.